Welcome to Lexington Public Library's Tales from the Kentucky Room podcast, where we explore Lexington's history and people. I'm your host, David Bryant, and in each episode, we will feature a guest who will share a piece of local history. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Tales from the Kentucky Room podcast. I'm your host, David Bryant, and today I'm speaking to our regular guest, Wayne Johnson. As you know, Wayne is LPL's expert on all things Lexington history. As part of our series of podcasts celebrating Lexington's 250th birthday, today we're exploring important sports moments in Lexington history. Welcome back to the podcast, Wayne.
Thanks, David.
All right, Wayne, this is going to be a fun podcast today. I feel like I should say at the beginning, I'm no expert on sports, so this will probably be me learning a lot from you. So I just thought kind of to get the ball rolling, do you want to talk about some of the most notable sports events in Lexington's history?
Sure. Now, like we mentioned in some of our previous podcasts about Lex 250, we came up with a list of 250 notable people in Lexington's history and also a list of 250 notable events in Lexington. And then we actually ranked the top 10, in my view, my opinion, of the top events in Lexington's history. But I thought it would be fun to just talk about some of the sports events in our history that are included in the notable events.
Sure.
So we'll start with horse racing, because horse racing is very important to the community of Lexington, and it has a very long and valued history to the community and to the state. I mean, we are the horse capital of the world, make no mistake about it.
Right.
I know there's sometimes there's debate, but to me, there's no debate. One thing I want to add about sports, too, people, when you talk about sports, to me, that's like the one topic you can talk about and not really get into any trouble. Like if you want to take up for your favorite team, you should be able to take up for your favorite team or favorite player without anybody, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I've always, as a kid, we used to talk sports just to be talking. And we never got into like bad arguments. We just debate, and then at the end of the debate, we go and, do other things. So sports to me is a great conversation piece for most people that know how to handle dialogue.
Okay.
So anyway, let's start with horse racing. Our first official horse meet was held we had horse racing in the streets prior to this, but in 1926, the first official race was held at what was called the Williams Race Course. And the location of that was around where the Lexington Cemetery is now. Go down Main Street and head west, and anybody who knows Lexington knows where the Lexington Cemetery is. That's where the Williams Race Course was at, and they would have races, horse races. Very soon after, the Kentucky Race Association, the Kentucky Race Association was formed 1826, and that's when the Williams Race Course opened up. Now, the association track was soon moved to a location at the area of 5th Street and Race Street. I mean, that's the reason why Race Street is called Race Street, because that's where they raced. And for the next 100 or so years, that's where the Kentucky Association racetrack was held. That's where they had races. It closed down in April of 1933, and for 3 years, we didn't have a racetrack after it closed down. And then folks like Hal Price Headley and Louis Beard, and there's one other gentleman, I forget his name right now, was very prominent in starting the Kingland racetrack in 1936. We all know where Kingland is located, right across the airport on Versailles Road. And like I said, it opened up in 1936, October 15th of 1936. And the trivia question I always like to throw out there is, what horse won the first ever race at Kingland? And it was a horse called Royal Remnant.
How many people usually know that?
None. So if you ever have to put together a trivia show, that's a favorite question. But Kingland, as you know, it's a go-to place for all people that love sports and horse racing. I've been there a few times. But a lot of people like to combine when Kentucky football is playing a home night game during the fall session of Kingland. They like to make an entire day of it, go to Kingland in the afternoon, and then go out to the football game at Kroger Field. I still call it Commonwealth Stadium, but it's Kroger Field now. And they make an entire day out of it. It's a big celebration. We actually did that last year for the Auburn football game, and that's the first time I ever combined a UK football game with a visit to Keeneland.
Yeah, I've been to Keeneland a few times myself. I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I always have a game plan when I go out there. Is okay, this is how much money I will plan on losing, and don't go any further than that. So it's always good to have a game plan when you go to the racetrack. But that was a major event in Lexington's history for sports. Now, another event was in November 1947 when the great thoroughbred Man o' War died.
Absolutely, yeah.
They actually, the afternoon that Man o' War died, I think UK was playing a football game that day, and the announcer interrupted and say, "Oh, Man o' War has passed away." That's how important Man o' War was to this community. I've always thought Secretariat was the greatest racehorse of all time based on his Triple Crown Belmont race. But you can make an argument for Man o' War as far as his impact on society. People would come visit from all over the world just to see Man o' War after he retired. And so Man o' War was a great racehorse, and Man o' War Boulevard named after him.
Yeah, so. I didn't know that people came just to visit. Yeah. Like, it was like tourism to visit Man o' War.
I think I remember reading where, I think it was Judy Garland came, and
wow.
And they would just come to visit and just, pat them on the head. And so when Man o' War died, it's
a big deal.
Yeah, a very, very sad day for all horse race people. Now, another event that a lot of people don't know about, but in April of 1965, the first white thoroughbred, entire white, called White Beauty, raced, and this horse was the first pure white thoroughbred to ever race in the United States. And it made its debut in Keeneland. I think it was April 6th of 1965. It did not win, but it was it was covered by all the newspapers, and it was a big event in Keeneland's history. Another event in Keeneland's history that is very notable was when Kurt Becker became Keeneland's first race announcer in April 1997. Up to then, when the races were held, there wasn't any race announcer. They would just race them.
And so that didn't happen until 97?
1997.
Wow.
Keeneland has been very important to the Lexington community all these years, and I'm sure, hopefully I'm around for it, but I'm sure in 2036 they'll have a big 100th anniversary of the opening of Keeneland to celebrate it. And we can't forget about harness racing either. The Red Mile Racetrack is a great place for those who love harness racing. The Red Mile actually opened up in September of 1875, and a notable event in addition to that was they didn't have nighttime harness racing like they have now when they opened up. It was actually like 90 years after they opened up. On May 8th, 1962, night harness racing made its debut at the Red Mile. Now, I failed to mention, as far as Keeneland, the Breeders' Cup, which is probably the biggest two-day racing event in the thoroughbred sports, came to Keeneland in 2015 for the first time. I think Breeders' Cup has run since 1988, but it didn't come to Keeneland until 2015. Keeneland is a perfect race course. It's just a beautiful race course. And
so it's that yearly, the Breeders' Cup?
Yes.
And it's always at Keeneland now?
No.
Okay.
It's a 2-day event. They move it around.
Okay.
And it came back in 2022. Yeah, the Breeders' Cup next to the Derby, Kentucky Derby is like the biggest event.
What about the World Equestrian Games?
The World Equestrian Games came in 2000. That's a good question. Came in 2010, held at the Kentucky Horse Park. Now, the opening of the horse park, I guess, is actually on my list of 250 notable events. It opened, I think, in September of 1978. I'm not much of a equestrian, steeplechase, all that kind of thing that they do there. I've never actually witnessed one other than on television. But I know they have the 3-day Rolex event out there.
Right.
Or at least they used to. They may have changed sponsorships. Who knows? Yeah, when the World Equestrian Games came here in 2010, it was a big event.
It brought people from all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah.
I know the library, we were told by a former librarian that we cannot take any days off during the World Equestrian Games because we got to be here for, I think it was like a 2-week event, something like that. But yeah, people came in, and this was back in the day when Centerpoint they still hadn't started construction. So the entire Centerpoint block there was a big field of grass and had it fenced in and had vendors, and it's pretty neat. My wife and I went down there one night, and the World Equestrian Games was a major event in our history.
Okay.
But, horse racing, you
could do a whole episode on the horse racing.
Yeah. And it's just such a popular sport. And to repeat, we are the horse capital of the world. This podcast makes it official if it wasn't official before that. Now, another sport that has been very important to Lexingtonians over years is golf.
Ah,
yeah, golf.
I thought you were going to say basketball next.
Well, we're keeping that for last.
Okay,
but golf has always been a favorite sport of people. Actually, as I get older, I can't play basketball or football or softball anymore. I could, but I don't think I'd last. But I've taken up golf. I'm not very good at it, but I love to play it. And a notable event is the opening of the Meadowbrook Par 3 golf course in May of 1968. And the reason why it's important to somebody like me is I can't, I'm not a good golfer. I can't play these big courses like Lakeside or Ilar, Lexington Country Club, those kind of courses. So we go out and play Meadowbrook Par 3. It's suited for people who like to play golf, but maybe can't, play the big courses or get frustrated playing the big courses. Now, 2 famous golfers that I will mention and we did a podcast on one of them, unfortunately, because she was murdered in 1941, and that was Marion Miley.
Right.
She was a great amateur golfer. And not only was she a great amateur golfer, she was also like a goodwill ambassador whenever she would travel throughout the country playing golf. Lexington adopted her as, our representative when she went out to all these golf tournaments. She was a very popular golfer in person. And her murder was very tragic, and she and her mom were shot to death in a burglary attempt at the Lexington Country Club.
Wow.
And yes, and it just it tore the community,
And like you said, we have an episode.
Yes, one of the early episodes. I think we have a 2-part.
Definitely check that out.
Yeah, we have a 2-part podcast on her. But yeah, Marion, I always refer to Marion Miley as our Amelia Earhart, somebody that was taken away from us much too young and would have accomplished great things, not necessarily in the golfing world, because back then, women's golf was not like it is now.
Right.
But she was just like I said, a goodwill ambassador, very smart, and would have gone on to big things.
Big things, yeah.
I think.
Definitely.
Another golfer who bears mention is Gay Brewer.
Okay.
Some of the old-time Lexingtonians would remember Gay Brewer. He won the 1967 Masters, which was a major tournament. He grew up here in Lexington. I think he played at the Lafayette High School and played in the state championships and won them. And I think he ended up winning 10 PGA. He was a PGA Tour member and won 10 events or so. The old Picadome golf course there on the corner of Harrodsburg Road and Mason Healy used to be called Picadome. And I think several years ago they changed the name to Gay Brewer Golf Course after he passed away. But those 2 golfers, very, very important, very notable in our history. Now, the next sport I'm going to talk about is baseball. We had some prominent teams back in the early 20th century, semi-pro and amateur teams like the Lexington Colts and the Lexington Hustlers. And the Hustlers were an all African-American team when they were playing in the 40s. And they eventually began to integrate with white players. And the story goes, if I remember this correctly, John Scoop Brown, who was a manager, first baseman for the Lexington Hustlers, got on city bus one day, and Bobby Flynn, who was a really good amateur baseball player here in town, was on the bus, and apparently nobody was picking him up as a player, and Scoop Brown knew how good a player he was and asked him to come play with the Hustlers, and he became the first white player to play for the Hustlers. And it was the same year, it was 1947, and it was the same year that Jackie Robinson integrated Major League Baseball. And soon after, Bobby Flynn, who, by the way, is the father of Doug Flynn, who was a pretty good Major League player in the 70s and 80s. And I think I remember reading something somewhere where Doug Flynn said his father was better than he was as a baseball player. So it shows you how good he was. But they were the first team in the South to integrate their team, the baseball team. And they were actually called in a magazine article, I believe, or newspaper article. They were called the Team of Democracy.
So Lexington was a little ahead of some of the other places for that. Yeah.
The Hustlers baseball team was very important back in the day. Famous baseball players, Major League players, Satchel Paige, Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, if I remember correctly, they all came to Lexington to play either for the Hustlers or against the Hustlers. I think Satchel Paige came and pitched for the Hustlers one night.
Has anyone written a book about this? Because that sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Mm-hmm. And a lot of good baseball was played. Even though we weren't a major league city, I've always thought baseball, to me, it's just such a big sport here in Lexington. It's a fun sport. And, some of these other sports, football, basketball, they're important too, but there's something about baseball. Getting outdoors in the spring and the summer and going out and watching the current minor league team. There's just something about watching baseball and playing baseball. Now, in 1965, in October 1965, another notable event in sports, in Lexington sports history happened. Lexingtonian Lou Johnson, who went to Dunbar High School, actually hit the game-deciding home run in Game 7 of the World Series versus the Minnesota Twins.
Wow.
Yeah, the Dodgers won 2-0, and I always like to add that the Dodger pitcher, Sandy Koufax, who in my opinion is the greatest pitcher of all time, I think I've said that a few times in our podcast, he contributed. He pitched a shutout in what is considered one of the greatest pitching performances in history, in World Series history. And they actually wrote a book just on his Game 7 shutout. But anyway, Lou Johnson hit the game-winning home run for the Dodgers. And it's funny, from what I've read, Lou Johnson's played football and basketball at Dunbar, but didn't play baseball. So he ends up being a World Series star. Had a
wow. So
good
didn't
career.
Play baseball, but then later
became a
that's
major
amazing.
Yeah. He was an outfielder for the Dodgers.
Uh-huh.
Another notable event was when our South Lexington Connie Mack team in 1977 actually won a national baseball title. Connie Mack is the age group, I think, is 16 through 18, and we've had a great baseball history with Little League going from, now it's T-ball, Little League, Babe Ruth, Connie Mack. We've had some really good success over the years. We've had a couple teams. I think the 1971 Gardenside team made the Little League World Series in Williamsport. I think the 1979, I think it was the Southeastern Little League team made it to Williamsport for the World Series. So we've had a lot of success with our baseball teams over the years. Now, another notable event was in April of 2001 when the Lexington Legends, the Class A team for the Houston Astros at the time, I think they're now with Kansas City. Well, it was a big deal when they opened up at Applebee's Park over there off North Broadway. And it's a really popular place to go if you like to watch good baseball. But anyway, in April 2001, it brought minor league baseball to Lexington. I've been to quite a few games, haven't been to one here in the last 10 years or so, but it was always a treat to go out there and watch. We had a lot of future major league players come through Applebee's Park, and it's fun to watch them when they're first getting their start in professional ball. On June 6th of 2006, we had a major event with the Lexington Legends. Roger Clemens, who's a Hall of Fame type pitcher, is not in Hall of Fame for issues related to possible steroid use, but he was in rehab. I think he was with Houston. And when they rehab major league players, sometimes they'll send them down to the minors to do a couple starts. Well, actually, his son was playing for the Lexington Legends at the time, so they thought, well, that's a good way to get him to come rehab and play with his son. So it was a big event when he came to pitch in 2006. So, talking about the Legends, when they first started, they were the Houston Astros minor league affiliate, and then they turned to Kansas City. But now they're part of the Atlantic League, so they're no longer affiliated with those teams.
Okay.
But when they got their start, and to complete the notable events in our baseball history, the June 2024, when the UK baseball team made the College World Series. That I've been following the UK baseball team for decades, and they've come so close to making the College Baseball World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, and they finally made it in June of 2024. So that's a big notable event, and hopefully
a momentous occasion.
Yes,
yeah.
And hopefully we'll continue on that. Another sport we can talk about is football, which with UK football, that's very important here in Lexington. The first notable event is a sad event. Back in October 1923, Price McLean died the day after a game he played. Very sad occasion. When the UK new stadium opened up, they named it the McLean Stadium after Price McLean. Now, growing up here in Lexington, the stadium was basically known as Stall Field. I never called it McLean Stadium. It was referred to as Stall Field. But anyway, it was a tragic event in October 1923. Another major event in our football history is Bear Bryant being hired as a coach in 1946, January of 1946. Bear Bryant, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He coached here 46 through 53, so 8 seasons. And this was Kentucky's glory days of football. Bear Bryant led us to the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the big major January 1st, New Year's Day bowls. Actually, the greatest victory in UK football history, and I think it's non-debatable, was when UK beat number 1 ranked Oklahoma 13-7 on January 1st, 1951, ending Oklahoma's. I think they had a long winning streak, and UK and Bay Pirelli was the quarterback, and we beat them in the Sugar Bowl, and that's Kentucky's greatest football victory. If any listeners out there can come up with a better football victory, I'll be here for another week, so you can call me.
I'll take your word for it, because you know more than I do.
Yeah, and David will take the calls if I'm not here. But that was a major event in UK football history. In fact, in April 1951, part of Euclid Avenue was renamed Avenue of Champions because you had Stall Field on the south end of Euclid Avenue, and you had the UK Memorial Coliseum on the left side. And UK basketball won the 1951 National Basketball Championship. So they renamed the road Avenue of Champions. Whenever I drive by there, I can't help. I don't drive by there a lot, but when I do, I can't help but just look at Memorial Coliseum and think about all the glory days of the basketball team, and then look to my left at the Singletary Center for the Arts, which is where the old Stall Field used to be, and just think about football. But anyway, that was a notable event. 1965, Nat Northington signed a UK scholarship. And what was notable about that was he was the first African-American to sign a sports scholarship with UK. And then, unfortunately, another sad event in September of 1967, Greg Page, who had suffered an injury in August preseason practice and had been paralyzed, passed away on September 29, 1967. And that was a very notable but very sad event in our football history. I was actually here for this next event that I consider notable, probably because I was there. September 15, 1973, UK beat Virginia Tech in the first game ever at what was then known as Commonwealth Stadium. That was the first we moved. We left Stall Field in 72 and moved to Commonwealth Stadium in 1973. And I was actually there. So, that's probably why it made my notable list.
That's why they won.
Yeah.
You were there.
And so we've had a lot of highlights in football, but not as many as we have had in this next sport I'm going to mention, basketball. So we're going to start off with a little high school basketball here. In 1922, in a notable event, the Lexington High School, which was now known as Henry Clay High School, actually won the High School National Basketball Championship in Chicago. They had a national basketball championship for, I guess, the better high school teams in the nation. And Lexington High School won the national championship. Pretty amazing accomplishment. And then we spoke about this in our top 10 notable events. In May of 1930, Adolph Rupp was hired as the UK basketball coach and coached there for the next 42 years. I think all the success we've had in basketball over the years, the last almost century, can be attributed to starting with Adolph Rupp in 1930. He changed everything. And then, of course, in 1948, another notable event, the Fabulous Five, Rollins. Let me see if I can name them. Rollins, Barker, Grossa, Beard, and Wawa Jones were known as the Fabulous Five. Great basketball team, won the national championship. Then in 1957, let me skip back. 1951, we had an unfortunate betting scandal, which made the notables list that hit some colleges and hit UK, and we got put on probation for a year or two, and bad scandal.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So, there's been books written about it, but we rebounded. No pun intended.
Definitely.
In December of 1957, in another notable event, Vern Hatton hit a half-court shot over at the Coliseum to tie the game in the first overtime against a very good Temple team, and we eventually won the game in 3 overtimes. And it's like I would say, one of the most historic UK basketball shots in our history. I grew up hearing about it, and very, very big event. Now going back to we ended up playing Temple in the Final Four that year, and I think I think Vern Hatton might have won the game again, not with a half shot, but it was a close game, and UK won that, and eventually won the 1958 national championship that year. Going back to high school basketball that made our notable list, in 1961, Dunbar's Austin DeMoss hit a half-court shot in the semifinals of the state tournament at the Coliseum to beat Breathitt County. It's kind of the shot heard around the Kentucky high school world of basketball back in the day. And, back in those days, you never hitting those half-court shots. Nowadays it seems like people just practice them, but it was always, if you could win a game with a half-court shot, it was a pretty major achievement. 1966 was the famous UK versus Texas Western in the finals. Books have been written about it. There was actually a movie made about it. I actually cried after the game. I was like 9 years old. So
I guess your team lost.
My team lost. It was a historical game. Rupp's Runts, probably the most beloved team in UK basketball history, along with the Unforgettables in 92. But we got beat by Texas Western 72-65. I always point this out. Texas Western had like 34 free throws, and we only had like 13. So there's a big free throw discrepancy in that game that probably led to the loss. But anyway, Texas Western won that game, and it was the first time a group of 5 African-American starters beat a group of 5 white players. Very, very devastating loss for UK fans. Because we lost a national championship. It's never fun.
How many national championships?
8.
Has 8.
8. And
do you know all the years?
Okay, David, you're going to test me? Here we go. Here's for all those people out there that wonder if I know anything about sports. 1948, Fab 5. 1949, Fab 5 minus 1 Fab 5 player. 1951 with Cliff Hagan and Frank Ramsey. 1958 with Vern Hatton and Johnny Cox. So how many is that? 1978 with Jack Givens, Roby, and Macy in that group. 1996, Patino's great team. 1998, Tubby Smith's fantastic first year at UK. Is that 7?
There's another one.
I know.
Yeah.
I actually went to this one in New Orleans, 2012.
12, yes.
So, yeah, we've had 8. We probably should have had a lot more. UCLA, I think, holds the record for most championships. I think it's, let me make sure, Wooden won 10, and then they won one in 95, 11. So UCLA has the most, but UK...
just my own personal experience with 2012. I lived in Louisville at the time.
Oh, well.
And UK won, and it was crazy.
Yeah, they actually beat Louisville
Yes.
in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And we ended up, my stepson and I ended up with better hotel arrangements because when the Louisville fans left New Orleans that day, we just went to another hotel and got a better room. So that worked out in more ways than one when Louisville got beat out.
I was wondering, do you have a favorite UK basketball game?
Yes.
Does one stand out in your memory?
And actually, you must have ESP because my next comment, now people will differ with me on this. You have to be my generation and understand the story as a fan. Now, players might take a different perspective on it. I don't know. They actually recently celebrated this team at Rupp Arena, the 1975 runner-ups, a few weeks ago at a UK game. But to me, my favorite basketball game of all time, without a doubt, it's not a national championship game, was the March 22nd, 1975 game where UK beat an unbeaten Indiana team coached by Bobby Knight, who's just getting his start, as a national figure. And we beat them in the Mid-East Regional Final. I think it was 92-90, if I remember correctly. And the reason why it's so great was, first of all, Indiana's at the time was a big rival of us. But also, and like I pointed out before in previous podcasts, sometimes the journey is so kind of fixes up the result. The journey that UK team, the Super Kittens that came here as freshmen, they weren't allowed to play on the varsity back in those days. Well, anyway, they had a lot of pressure to win a national championship. And in December of 1974, that team went to Bloomington, Indiana, and got blown out by Indiana. And to make matters even more embarrassing, Bobby Knight, he claimed it was a playful slap, but he whacked Coach Hall, Joe Hall, in the back of the head as Joe Hall had his back to him. And so we, UK fans, UK team remembered all that. And this Indiana team, the next year they were unbeaten and just they were one of the greatest teams ever in college basketball history. And we beat them to go to the Final Four. And to this day, for me as a fan, that is my single greatest UK basketball game. People sound surprised when you say your favorite game was a non-championship winning game, but to me, if you grew up,
well, it's like you said, it's the build up to the game,
the
2 legendary programs, and
the journey. And you talked about Louisville earlier. We had in March of 1983, we had the dream game against Louisville. We hadn't played them in like 24 years, and Denny Crum, coach of Louisville, kept after Coach Hall, say, "Hey, we want to play you guys." Coach Hall kind of had the state wrapped up. Everybody loved UK basketball, and he didn't want to bring in another rival. But we finally met him in the Mid-East Regional Final in Knoxville, which I was actually at that game too. I end up in some of these big games for whatever reason, but we got beat 80-68 in overtime. It was a great game, not a great result for UK fans, but it eventually got the UK Louisville rivalry going again.
Well, this discussion about what's the best game could go on for hours and hours.
Well, to me, you actually have to win the game for me to consider it. But it's funny you mention that because the next thing I was going to mention was a game, probably the greatest game ever in college basketball history. And that's when we got beat by Duke with the Laker shot.
Say that.
Yes. And I will make the argument or make the point that I think again, it's the journey. We had another scandal that hit in 1988 with the Emory package opening up, and UK got put on probation for a couple years. Sutton was fired or resigned. And then we hired Coach Pitino, and we were like dead in the water when Pitino got here. All the players left, and it was just like you couldn't get any lower than UK basketball than when Pitino got here. And for us to go from Pitino's first year to the third year and play the mighty Duke team, number 1 ranked, defending champions, and we went down to the final buzzer in overtime. To me, that was our Rocky moment. If you ever watched the Rocky movies, Rocky 1, he didn't win the fight,
right?
But he went to 15 rounds, and it's the journey. So I consider that one of UK's basketball, as a fan, finest moments. Even though we got beat, and it's hard to watch that shot, to me, it's a great moment. And I personally, and again, it's just my fan perspective, I don't think we would have won the Final Four if we'd beaten Duke. I think we would have had to play Indiana the next game, which we'd beaten earlier. Bobby Knight coached again. And, I'm like, maybe it's best we ended our journey with the unforgettables with that shot. It kind of has a Shakespearean feel to it, but that's just me as a fan. That's one of the great things about being a fan is you can kind of like, here's my opinion, do with it what you want. But anyway, those are, some of the notable events in our history, Lexington history.
Your passion for it really comes through.
Well, I grew up, sports was very important. I liked to play it, wasn't a great player, but I really enjoyed playing it. So if you enjoy playing it, you enjoy watching it. And of course, UK sports, UK basketball was always number 1 for any basketball fan growing up in Lexington, Kentucky.
So what are some of the UK sports announcers that stand out to you?
Oh, okay. Growing up, you have to remember when I was growing up in the 60s, you didn't have the internet and you didn't have all this television coverage like you do today. So listening to the games on the radio were how you got the games. And it was always a big event for me to listen to announcers like Claude Sullivan, and then, of course, Kaywood Lefford, who's a legend. And I'd always listen. You'd start your night by listening to they'd offer up a pregame show. And
what was that like? What was the pregame show like?
Kaywood would ask him some questions, and we won't get into that. But Coach Rupp was a fantastic basketball coach. Knew the game probably better than anyone, but he had this drawl that I can't duplicate it here. But he was just a fun guy to listen to. And so he would have his pregame show, and then you'd listen to the, Kaywood's call mostly. Claude Sullivan died in December of 1967 at a relatively young age. He had cancer, and then, but both of them were renowned UK sports announcers. But you always had to use your imagination when you listened to UK basketball games. We used to, I used to open my door, and we had the little opening from the wall to the door, and I'd roll up some socks. And while I'm listening to the game, here I am 7, 8 years old, shooting a roll of socks into my door and see if I could hit it. So anyway, yeah, Claude Sullivan and Kaywood are the two that were big when I was growing up. One quick story before we get to the end here that I have to say about Kaywood Lefford, because I know we mentioned something about in the last podcast about my 3-story apartment building. When Kaywood was announcing his last game, the Duke game of 1992, with about, 10 to 12 minutes left, Kentucky looked like they were out of it. They were down like 11, 12 points. And I'm like, well, this is the number 1 Duke. We're not going to end up winning this game. And so I said to myself, well, celebration of Kaywood's last game, I'm going to listen to the game and watch it on television, turn the sound off in television. So the last 10 to 12 minutes, I was listening to Kaywood and watching the game on TV. And when Kentucky made their comeback, and this is how big to me UK basketball is, when Kentucky was making their comeback in the second half against Duke, the entire building was just rolling like an earthquake whenever they hit a big three-pointer. It was amazing to me. It's like, my goodness. And everybody in the apartment complex must have been watching the game. It's the closest thing I ever got to an earthquake. And then, of course, when Leitner hit a shot, it was a little calmer. But I didn't hear any outrage, but that was always an experience I've always remembered following UK basketball, was that turning off the TV sound and listening to K-Wood and just hearing and feeling. You could just feel it. The whole building was just shaking that whole last 10 or 12 minutes.
Well, if a listener's not a UK basketball fan, they are by the end of this episode from listening to you talk about it. Yeah. It's really impressive.
Well, as a kid, at least as a boy, that's what you're brought up. If you like sports,
right,
you're somehow indoctrinated.
Just part of the culture.
The first year I remember following Kentucky was Rupp's Runts teams, and I don't know how I got interested in it, but I did. And
well, finally, I just want to take a second to say Wayne's mentioned this a couple of times in the interview already, but this is kind of a bittersweet episode for us a little bit. Wayne is retiring at the end of February, so by the time this episode comes out, Wayne's going to be on a beach somewhere, relaxing, drinking something fruity, I hope. But we just really take a chance to thank you for everything you've contributed over the years. You've really done a great job with the episodes that you've researched and prepared.
I've always enjoyed these podcasts. We have Erin sitting in here. She has sat in from day one. Mm-hmm. I think we did our first podcast, 2017 or something?
18, yeah.
Okay, and Erin is the technology.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without Erin.
Oh no, she does a great job. And then Miriam was the
outstanding
interviewer before you took over. So it's been a lot of fun for me. It's fun researching the topics. This particular topic today, I didn't have to do a lot of research because it's like from memory.
Did you want to just take a chance to tell us about maybe what your favorite topic or two has been over the years?
Well, I've enjoyed all of them because it's local history. But the one that I think stands out, not only in podcasts, but in my program talks I've done at the various branches, including here at Central, that's always fascinated me from day one as a kid when I first learned about it, was the Betty Gale Brown murder. And I've done a lot of research on that. We did a couple podcasts. We actually had some friends of Betty Gale respond to us. And it's always like a whodunit murder mystery. As you know, Betty Gale Brown was found strangled to death in front of Old Morrison one early morning, October 27th, 1961, and it never was solved. And, we had a talk back in May of 2023 where an audience member was kind of critical of the fact that I kept talking about this. And she turned out to be a very good friend of Betty Gale Brown. And I just told her, I said, well, it's never going to be solved unless you talk about it. You can't just let it go back and fade in people's memories and just, because I think this case can be solved. I think if you just put the dots, follow the dots and put them together, it's a very solvable case. After my last talk at Central, before that, I always considered a cover-up as a real possibility. After a certain audience member criticized me in front of some other people, that convinced me, hey, this is a cover-up. And I'm convinced at this point that it's a cover-up. I think some people out there know who did it. And, all the people that are still alive, they don't have a lot of time to tell their story. And that's the reason I kept bringing the topic up is, hey, look, we want this. There's some people here who want this case solved, even though now it's 63 years old.
Right.
But that's always been my favorite topic. As a kid, playing in Gratz Park, I had it pointed out as a 5-year-old that, hey, something happened over there in front of Old Morrison, and I've always been curious about that.
Well, I was at that talk, and it was riveting. It was like, I feel like you've done so much research into that case, and I feel like if it can be solved, you definitely will contribute to that.
Well, I will have to admit now that part of the reason I've done podcasts and these talks is to draw out people like that audience member to see what they think about it. And we've had a few of her friends that have contacted me or said something to me at a program that, it's kind of been my part of the reason I did the talks was to draw these people out, because they're the ones that they're going to have to say who did it. I can't say who did it. I think I know who did it, but I can't. If I don't know for sure, I'm not going to say. So
you'll tell us after the interview. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much. Hopefully you'll come back as a guest sometime on the podcast.
Yes. I do want to close with one comment. When you said I'm retiring, just make sure everybody knows it's not a forced retirement. Today's my 68th birthday. It's time to retire. I've enjoyed these podcasts and these talks, and I've enjoyed working at the Lexington Public Library, and I wouldn't change my career one bit.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Kentucky Room, a podcast brought to you by the Central Library's Kentucky Room staff at the Lexington Public Library. If you enjoyed listening, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. And please remember to recommend the podcast to friends. If you have any questions about local history or genealogy research, you can visit us in the Kentucky Room to use our collection and newspaper microfilm. Or you can email us at elibrarian@lexpublib.org. That's elibrarian@lexpublib.org. I'm David Bryant, and we'll be back with another episode next month.